Alrighty, welcome to part 2 of my Lawless Time card review. Now, I'm super pumped from this set. It looks incredible. Lots of new cool leaders, new fun cards, lots of power too. I think they're doing a great job with this set overall, so I'm super excited to jump into this review. Before I get going, please hit that subscribe button, and if you're interested in some more content from me, do check out my Patreon as well. So the reveals for this spoiler are going up until January 23rd. Lots of new cards because we also had a stream where they dumped the entire content of the Spotlight decks. Got 4 new leaders to review, a new rare base, some new legendaries, and then all the cards. But as always, we start with the new leaders, and this one was actually revealed the previous week, and it is Lando Calrissian. He's a new cunning leader. He's got an action that costs 1 that says choose an aspect, then discard a card from your deck. If it has the chosen aspect, create a credit token. So the idea behind this is not to be guessing. You're going to build a deck around this ability, so it's basically got a 0% chance to miss, which means one of two things. Either you're playing a mono yellow deck, and it doesn't mean that every card in your deck is mono yellow, it just means every card in your deck will have a yellow pip. So for instance, you could do yellow blue, and then you can play those yellow blue hybrid cards, you can play yellow heroic cards, and you can play just neutral yellow cards. Or the other option is mono heroic, which means every card in your deck should have a heroic aspect symbol in it. It'll give you a little more flexibility in the cards you play because you can do like yellow heroic and blue heroic, for instance, but you won't be able to play those neutral yellow cards, and some of those look pretty good. Those are really the 2 ways I think you are going to build around this ability, but it is a very powerful ability. If you want to compare that to Jabba's version of creating a credit token, he has to bounce one of his own units to get the credit. This is essentially a free roll as long as you're, building the deck to account for it. I could see you using this ability on turn 1 and just not play any turn 1 plays. No 2-drops, no 1-drops, but you could play 1-drops, I guess, but they're often not great as standalone units. And then just going into your turn 2 with a 4-drop. There's a lot of really powerful 4s in these colors. But yeah, that's the idea here. And his unit is a 6-flip 4/7 without any keywords. Nothing particularly exciting about the leader, but he has a when deployed that says you may defeat a friendly credit token. If you do, you create 3 credits. So if you have a credit token in play on your 6R turn, you would have had normally access to 7 resources, but you can flip that Lando, blow it up, create 3 more, and now you'll have access to a 9-drop. Which 9-drops would we want to play? Like the best one probably right now to do would be Bo-Katan. Bo-Katan is not a yellow card, so you'd probably be more in that mono heroic style deck. But there may be others that we want to play, and of course you're not taxed into only playing 9-drops. You could play 9 resources worth of cards or save some of those credits for another turn. But it is a very powerful when deployed. It's a huge resource cheat. It reminds me a little bit of Plot Palpatine's 3 resource cheat. Now he also cheats a bunch of actions, but Lando's going to let you play much better cards theoretically because you don't have to play all those plot stuff. This looks like a super exciting leader to build around specifically because of his leader ability. This idea of messing with your curve so that you can skip certain turns. I really like the idea of just skipping turn 1. If you look at some of the best 4-drops, there's a lot of good like 4/5s. The Kanan that we talked about last week would be an excellent turn 2 play because you're going to just bounce your opponent's turn 1 play and the board and have the 3/4 restore 1 on the board. That's great. There's like things like Blue Ace that you could play on turn 2 and just ambush your opponent's space start. There's a lot you can do here, and then you're going to potentially use this ability again on later turns. Maybe you're on your 5R turn, you'll play a 4 and another coin. You could potentially just play a regular curve out game and thus use this ability sparingly when you have that extra resource available to you. But 1 cost to bank of resource is really powerful. And I think because of how free rolly this feels compared to something like Jabba, it's going to be a good ability. And of course, also flipping a leader and essentially getting a 2 resource cheat is also really strong. And, his leader unit isn't great. and that's probably the weakest part of the whole package here. But this is a really interesting build around leader, and gonna be excited to mess around with this one. All right, next new leader is a new Darth Vader, and this is a 7-flip aggression leader. He's got an action on his front side that says discard a card from your hand, deal 1 damage to a unit or base. So he is a pinging leader. It doesn't cost a resource, and it doesn't have a condition, but it does have a pretty hefty cost, which is a non-resource cost, which is discarding a card. So we want to make that cost hurt us as little as possible, so you are going to want some kind of discard synergies. There are a couple cards in this reveal that are discard synergy stuff, so we will talk about them in the context of Vader. There's other things, of course, too, because this can free roll heroic cards into your discard pile, which then lets you play like the Anakin 6-drop from Legends of the Force, turn that ability on. Just having the ability to ping on demand is pretty strong. It is a big cost. It's not like you can do this every turn and succeed. But as long as you have some cards that synergize well with this, I mean, in Eternal, like imagine Kylo's tie, that would be crazy. You both get to ping and just play your 3-2 on turn 1. That would be awesome. But we should be getting maybe a little more than what we got so far in terms of discard synergy. I'll look out for it. But even without it, I think there is some play to this ability. Now, he is a 7-flip 6/8, so he's got big boy stats. He's got very interesting on-attack ability. It says you can discard any number of cards from your hand and then deal damage to a unit or base equal to the number of cards discarded this way. So we continue into this discard theme. Now, one thing you should note that you can do absolutely crazy amounts of damage with the card Aggressive Negotiations in this. Now, Aggressive Negotiations isn't like full combo with Vader because, of course, you're discarding your cards from on your leader side, so it's going to maybe make Aggressive Negotiations not huge. But Aggressive Negotiations does check for your hand size before you play it. So when you play it, let's say you have 4 other cards in your hand, it's a +4, and then you can also discard all 4 of those cards and do a +8, right? So you can do tremendous amounts of damage on attack with this Vader, and that, if you have a card draw stuff in your deck, you can go for a really big play there. You, of course, can not discard your whole hand and just do enough to either kill a unit, finish something off, do some extra damage to base. This is very interesting as well. You can maybe just build this as a control deck and use him as a finisher. You have this free roll damage ability. Maybe you pair this with blue for reasons that we will talk about shortly. But yeah, I find this like a very interesting build around. Same with Lando. I think this is a cool leader. Like there's cool stuff to do here. We have discard synergy. We have OTK, 1-turn kill style ability here on his leader unit. You have pinging synergies. So a lot to like brew with here. The next leader is Jyn Erso, and this is a heroic vigilance leader with an action that costs 1. If a friendly rebel unit was defeated this phase, search the top 3 cards of your deck for a card and draw it. So we've seen 1 cost draw a card on a bunch of different leaders in different ways, right? We've seen that on some poor leaders like Cassian and Hunter. We've seen it on some decent leaders like Chancellor Palpatine and Emperor Palpatine, although he got a ping with the ability. It's solid. It's okay. The ability is okay. Now, this has pros and cons to it. One, the con is that it's not always going to be easy to trigger because a friendly rebel unit has to be defeated. So this is a rebel build around. You're going to need most of the units in your deck to be rebels to make this sort of ability work. And then something also has to die. But on the plus side here, this isn't even just draw a card. You get to search the top 3 for any card, not just rebels, right? You're going to be able to find anything you want. One really cool card that you can go find is Rey from Legends of the Force, because you can just put that in your hand and then deal 2 damage to something. And since this does filter 3, it's going to up your chances of finding her. And this does read to me as a little bit of an aggro leader, because you're going to try to get units into play. The rebels are usually a little more aggressive. You're going to have these units die, and you're going to be able to refuel yourself. Another card, which I've mentioned with Vader already is aggressive negotiation, so you have a built-in draw effect on your leader. That's obviously going to synergize well with a card that deals damage to your opponent, equal the amount of cards in your hand. So that's a nice little bonus there. On the unit side, it's a 5 cost 3/6. It's not particularly impressive stat line. Now 3/6 is becoming a little more of the default for 5 cost, but a lot of the good 5 cost leaders, they're not just 3/6s. They have either like some trait or yes, keyword, maybe like Sabe has raid. You see some with maybe like give an experience to something on attack, like Obi. There are 4/6s, right? 3/6 vanilla is a little like, it's hard to say it's understated, but it's like a little underwhelming. But it does have a nice on attack here. It's the same ability basically. If a rebel died, you get to search the top 3 cards of your deck for a card and draw it, so you don't have to pay that one resource anymore. She is a rebel, of course, as well. So it's going to continue that trend of drawing cards. Maybe you can get a couple cards from your Jyn, which would be great. Keep that hand nice and beefed up. Get some benefit from large hands with aggressive negotiations, but also maybe Rebellious Hammerhead, which is also a rebel unit, notably. And build around your rebel synergy. Maybe blue-red is my first thought, but there could be blue-green as well, maybe even blue-yellow. There's rebels in a lot of colors. And I think this leader is solid. I think this is better than it might look like at first glance. Maybe the unimpressive stat line pushes people away a little bit. Maybe like thinking back to other leaders that have had similar like draw effects and knowing that they weren't like meta. But as a 5 cost leader that does this, it's a little different than the ones we've previously seen. As an ability that also lets you tutor for cards, like search 3, not just take the top card. I think that's relevant. So Jyn looks solid to me. And last new leader for the day is Director Krennic, and he's the big ramp leader for villain, it seems like. He's green, villainous. He's got an action, says defeat a friendly unit, create a credit token, so he's another credit generator. This is also a pretty big cost, but again, it's not a resource cost, which is really nice. So there are some synergies directly with like when defeated units. We're going to see a new ramp card later in this set, which is very similar to Super Laser Tech. So that, of course, is a really nice thing to be self-killing with Director Krennic, but also a card like Legacy Run. This is even better than like Palpatine's way of doing it, because here you can do it on your 5 resource turn. You don't have to wait until you have that extra resource like Palp needed to do. And not only that, you get to bank a credit for your next turn. And getting a credit for defeating your own units is pretty strong. Credits are a pretty big deal, and they're really going to change the way you curve in this game. I think the credits are huge. So what does he do on the unit? He's a 7 cost 4/9, so he's got Yoda's stat line in cost. And he says when deployed, another friendly unit deals damage equal to its power to an enemy unit. So it's not quite Yoda ability, but it's kind of similar, right? It's a big flip that like you try to kill a unit with it. Now, he can't trigger off himself, so you do have to have something else in play. And when you are flipping, you hopefully have something large in play because you want to be able to kill something large. But I think a lot of the time this isn't going to be killing giant threats. It's probably going to be killing medium or small threats. Primarily because you're going to be ramping and might not have time to play like a 6/6 or something before you flip Krennic. Because this is a 7 flip, this works really well with the resupply carriers, very similarly to how Yoda does. And in fact, in some ways, it's even better than Yoda in that case, because if Yoda wasn't able to have something die that turn, its flip turn was completely random. And here, when you resupply carrier and flip Krennic, you at a minimum are going to be dealing 4 damage because that resupply carrier has 4 power. This looks good to me. This looks like a pretty strong ramping leader. It has a pretty powerful when deployed, not like the most game-breaking when deployed, but being able to make credits at the low cost of maybe just killing some of your own, like, I don't think that's a huge cost. You're not going to use this every turn, but there's a few units that you have synergy with, and then of course you can just defeat off some units that are about to die anyway, or maybe you can build into some tokens, like even the Kajimi Patroller, right? It makes 2/1/1s when you play it. That's plenty of fodder for this Krennic. You can go into your next turn always with 4 resources, right? Similarly to how Lando can just always go into his turn 2 with 4 resources. Overall, yeah, like this looks like a pretty solid ramp leader, and a really interesting build around. All right, and we have one new rare base. It's Shipbreaking Yard. This is a red base, also 26 health, just like the blue one. And it has an epic action. It says discard 3 cards from your deck. You may return a card discarded this way to the top of your deck. So you're not even drawing a card. You're just filtering 3 and putting 1 back on top if you'd like. Right now, I can tell you I have no idea what you're supposed to do with this, but I imagine there's going to be some synergy for this. Now, if anyone here has played Magic the Gathering, in MTG, if this card, if a card like this existed, it would absolutely break mechanics like Dredge or Delve, right? Like if you could use cards in your discard to pay for costs, or if you could play cards from your discard pile, then this would be just crazy fuel. I'm not exactly sure what you're supposed to do with it right now. There's not enough synergy to warrant just paying for life and an action to just put cards into your discard pile, right? You're not even drawing a card. So currently, I'm going to say this does nothing, but I'm going to keep tabs on new releases and, of course, in new sets potentially, and see if there's going to be enough graveyard or discard pile synergy to warrant this kind of effect. And next up, we're in the legendary section of the review, and we start off with a bang. Super Laser Blast is back. This time it's called Single Reactor Ignition, and it's got an extra color, so it's going to be a blue-red villainous card. It still costs 8. It still defeats all units. You get a little bonus here. It says for each enemy unit defeated this way, deal 1 damage to its controller's base. So it's going to burn your opponent a little bit. I'm not going to say that's that important, because usually decks that are playing Super Laser Blast style effects are not really pushing damage. But it's something, right? It does something, and it could matter. It matters more than 0, so it's a nice upside. The card is actually technically more powerful than Super Laser Blast, because it does damage to your opponent, but it's a little more difficult to include in decks. So it looks like the devs just didn't want the board wipe card to be in the ramp color, or they wanted to make sure you couldn't play the ramp, the green ramp specifically while running this. So you're going to be in blue-red if you're going to play this. But this has eternal implications, because now those blue-red control decks can run 6 copies of Super Laser Blast, essentially. I'm really happy to see that they printed this card. I think it's really important that a card like this exists in the game and that it is powerful, costed appropriately. I know not everyone's going to love that a card like this exists. I still don't know if we'll have enough pure removal cards that run like full control decks, but this is probably the most important piece of a pure control deck, and it exists now. And it's worth that legendary include. I think it's smart to have put this behind 2 colors now, so you're going to be locked into that blue-red. You're not going to be able to do that green, and yeah, like this is it. This is probably the legendary I think is most deserving of the legendary rarity thus far. The next one is Persecutor, and it's a big old triangle. We're getting a lot of legendary triangles in this one. This is a red villainous 9-drop. It's got a 9/7 stat line. It's got the capital ship trait, so of course we'll just say Piet, then I'll be done talking about Piet. And then, when played and on attack, choose an arena. You may deal 3 damage to each unit in that arena, so it kind of plays Bombing Run when you play it. This doesn't strike me as very good, because Bombing Run on your 9 resource play is not that impactful. It does do it on attack also, but this is very slow for a 9-drop. I think you're looking for a little more pure value when you play a 9-drop. It does not compare particularly favorable to the 9-drops that I've seen play so far. Like Piet can make it cheaper, and maybe that's where it's good. I think it's really kind of weird that it does damage to itself if you pick the Space Arena, so it's going to deal 3 to itself, put it at 4 health if you ever actually need to use it to damage the Space Arena. That's not great. It's like it's okay. It's probably not even as good as the legendary blue one we saw in the last preview, the one that deals that shrinks everything -2/-2 of a certain trait. It looks okay, but not particularly exciting to me. And then we have another giant space triangle, and this one's Intimidator, and it's an 11 cost. It's also an 11/11 in command. Also a capital ship, so I guess Piet, we'll say it. And then, when played, return any number of friendly resources to their owner's hand. For each resource returned this way, create a credit token. So you can pick up a bunch of your own resources, refill your hand when you play this, and then make credits. You can, of course, pick up all 11 and just draw 11 cards, blow up all your resources, get 11 credits, and then play another 11 drop. You can also play aggressive negotiations with 11 cards in your hand. That would be pretty cool. Of course, I don't know if an aggressive negotiation deck is the kind of deck that's trying to play 11 drops. Maybe this has some implication in like really long grindy control mirrors where this is just gonna like draw you a bunch of cards. Past that, I don't see much use for this because, of course, it's an 11 drop that has absolutely no board impact when you play it. It doesn't have Sentinel. It doesn't kill anything. It just picks up all your resources. So that's not really what you're looking for in most games as a stabilizing force. So this doesn't help you stabilize, but it helps you refuel a bunch. You don't need to pick up every card and blow up every resource you have, but you can hide some of your important cards for later and use this. So maybe it's a sideboard thing for like grindy control mirrors. Yeah. And maybe you try to OTK someone with aggressive negotiations. Overall, the legendaries, the Super Laser Blast, the single reactor ignition is fantastic. Still seeing a lot of legendaries. I don't think they're bad. I think the legendaries overall are a little better than we've seen in the last set, but they are largely just giant bombs, and I don't see most of them as like pure staples. I still think that's going to be necessary to help singles prices and box prices maintain. Again, I will stress my opinion on legendaries is not because I want people to get priced out of this game. It's because I want the game to succeed, and I don't think it can if boxes sell for $40 2 weeks after their release, or $60 2 weeks after their release, right? That's below MSRP, and stores will simply not be able to hold that product if the singles prices are so low that no one is buying sealed product anymore. And legendaries are just one knob that can be pulled to help maintain box price, but it's a pretty simple one, I think, and there are cards, especially there's some uncommons and rares that I think could have been legendaries instead of some of these giant ones we're seeing right now. Not that all of them are bad, and there are some good ones as we've seen. All right, let's go into the multicolored cards, and we'll start with blue-green stuff. So this is Nothing Left to Fear. It's a 5-cost event. It says choose a friendly unit and give it +2/+2 for this phase. And then you may defeat a non-leader unit with power equal to or less than the chosen unit. So it's like a spin-off on Craving Power. The buff isn't permanent. It's just +2/+2 for the phase. You can also say it's like a spin-off on Overwhelming Barrage. It doesn't do damage, though. It just defeats, which means it does get through shields, which is nice. But it also has some downside in that it doesn't like kill things that have like Chewbacca pilot on them, for instance, because you're not actually dealing damage. And the other thing is, of course, you can't hit leaders with this, which you could with Craving Power and Overwhelming Barrage. I'd say the card is solid. It still looks pretty good to me. 5 is a lot, and it's still only ever going to be 1-for-1 removal. So that's like limiting, but Craving Power is a solid card in the right builds, and this could do a pretty similar impersonation there. Heroic decks can play this as well, which they haven't been able to do with Craving Power and Overwhelming Barrage. Yeah, like I think this is a solid piece. It's not going to be nearly the staple that OB was, but I could see this getting some play in certain decks. And of course, getting that buff for a turn does mean that you might be able to push more damage or kill another unit that you otherwise wouldn't have been able to. That's it for blue-green, so we're going to go into blue-red. We got quite a few of those. The first is Shadow Cloaking. Now, this is a 5-cost event. It's also villainous. It says ready a unit and give a shield token to it. We've seen a lot of readying effects. Most of them are cheaper, but have more restrictions. We've seen Bravado, which does ready every unit for this cost, but sometimes it's cheaper. Here, you can't make it cheaper, but you are getting a shield bonus. I think primarily this is to like buff up a leader, like a big leader that can flip, attack, ready it, protect it, go again. Maybe with pilots where you get to get like really big, but then you have to be in a blue-red pilot deck. Maybe that means Asajj or something. The card is okay. This doesn't look like any sort of staple to me. It seems like maybe this could see some play though. We got a blue-red unit. It's a 2-drop Chiofane. It's a 2/4 Underworld Bounty Hunter. And it says on attack, you may choose 2 players. If you do, they each draw a card. So this typically is a little better for your opponent than yourself. They get to use the card before you, because since you're giving them the action, they're the ones that get to do it. Use the card first. However, you could also be building your deck to better use mass amounts of cards. I mean, Vader, for instance, you get more cards, you can discard more cards to use his ability, and that's pretty good. The unit itself is well statted. It's not like fantastic. It's a 2/4 vanilla for the most part, which is okay. It's not amazing. We usually want a little more from our 2/4s. We've seen restore on them and stuff like that. The card looks okay. You're probably going to need a reason to want a lot of cards in your hand and be okay with your opponent getting them because you think that you can make use of them. Usually means a lower curve deck or some kind of discard enabling. Next, we've got green yellow, and this is Forlom. It's also villainous. It's a 5-cost 4/5 Underworld Droid Bounty Hunter. So we got another Forlom. This is when played, you may attack with a friendly bounty hunter unit, even if it's exhausted and it can't attack bases. So it lets you double attack with a unit. It's a pretty strong effect. You just, of course, need to have a lot of bounty hunters. They need to be well statted so that they can, get a benefit from attacking twice in one turn. The card itself is a little understated as a 5-drop, but it does have a potent when played. This one is going to be like a support piece for a bounty hunter tribal deck, if something like that can take off. The next green yellow is Jyn Erso, and this is a card that honestly I think could have been a legendary because of how good it is, and this is a very important character. It's a cheap card too, like cost wise, which I think you do want some of your legendaries to not just be like 9-drops. This is a 2-cost command heroism cunning unit. It's a 2/2 rebel. When played, either give an experience token to a unit or exhaust a unit. So because it can give itself an experience, Jyn can give herself this token. She can just become a 3/3 for 2, which, there's your battlefield marine in this color. It also, has this tremendous upside of being a 2-drop that has a very relevant text later in the game because it can exhaust units, which is a really powerful thing to be doing with a 2-drop. We've seen Leia make splash appearances as a much weaker version of this card because of that exhaust effect. And of course, you can also give that experience token to anything, so you can buff a leader if you want. It has the rebel trait, which is going to be probably an important one in some capacity, maybe not command cunning, maybe will be though. This card is fantastic. This is a staple. If there is going to be a cunning heroism deck, this will be probably the best 2-drop in that deck, and there's not a lot else to say about it. We're getting some red-yellow cards here, and this is Volt Scaris's Defender. It's a 3-cost space unit. It's also villainous. It's a 3/3 Imperial Vehicle Fighter. When played, if you discarded a card from your hand or deck this phase, give a shield token to this unit. So if anything get milled from your deck, or if you, Vadered ability this turn, it's going to be a 3/3 shielded, which is slightly better than 7th Fleet Defender. And then it also has an on attack. You may deal 1 damage to a space unit and exhaust it. So it's going to be pretty good up there against other space decks, especially if those other space decks are like go wide with little units. It's not going to brawl particularly well with like the 3/4s of the world. If you do get the shield though, it can kill them, right? It attacks into them and pings them. So I think the shield is going to be a pretty important part of this card, which means you are probably going to need to be playing some kind of self-discard synergy. Vader looks enticing for that kind of effect. Might see some other ones, ways to discard cards off the top of your deck too, could turn this on. Without the shield, is this a good card? Probably not so much, even though it does brawl decently well in space. It's still, the 3/3 stat line is not fantastic for a 3-drop space unit. We have a new trick here. It's an event. You hold this. It costs 1. It says choose a friendly non-leader unit. An opponent takes control of it. If they do, deal 4 damage to another unit in the same arena. So you have to give them a unit so that you can then deal 4 to something for 1 resource. There's not a lot that I think you want to be giving away. Even like tokens that are 1/1s, like, it's still probably not worth it most of the time. Now, we're going to see a cunning card later, Jyn Erso, which is actually like a unit that your opponent might give you. So being able to give it Galen back to your opponent would actually be kind of busted. So if Galen becomes an incredibly important card in this format, then this could certainly be a sideboard card to counter that. But other than that, yeah, I just don't think it's usually going to be worth it to give your opponent even a bad unit like a 1/1 just so you can deal 4 for 1 cost. And then we have Urk. I think that's how you say it. It's a 4 cost Rebel Tusken Bounty Hunter. It's a 2/4 with Hidden and Raid 4. So Raid 4 is enormous. This attacks for 6. It's a 4 cost unit. That's a lot of damage. It's, it doesn't defend well. It only has 4 health for a 4-drop. It only hits for 2, but it does have Hidden, so your opponent can't immediately bump into it. If you can get 1 attack off with this, maybe that's worth it for a really hyper aggro deck because you get 6 damage out of this unit. Yeah, it's very interesting. It's got good traits too, Rebel and Bounty Hunter on it. That's a lot of damage though for a 4-drop. Now we're into yellow-blue, and the first one is Finn, 6 cost unit. He's a 6/5 with Ambush, and on attack, you may give a shield token to a non-unique unit. Well, you don't see a lot of 6-power ambushers for 6, and that's pretty good. And honestly, in this format, we've seen so many 5-cost leaders with only 6 health, and this is going to one-shot all of them on curve, and even potentially leave behind a shield on one of your other units. Finn looks good. This card looks really good to me. Cunning Vigilance has been basically the worst color combination in the game since the game started. I don't know if that's going to change drastically. Like, maybe it doesn't matter how good Finn is because Cunning Vigilance is still not really a color combination that works. But I do expect that Finn will be good in a Cunning Vigilance deck. All right, we're into just regular Vigilance now. We're done with the multicolored, and we've got Bodhi Rook, an excellent new 2-drop. He's a heroism unit. He's a 2/4 rebel, so he's got that 2/4 stat line with an important trait, and he has on attack, you may give a friendly rebel unit Sentinel for this phase, so he can give himself Sentinel on attack or something else. That's just really good. It's going to be even better if you have initiative potentially, so that Bodhi just protects your base for a turn, forces your opponent to attack into him. There's not a lot bad going on here. You've got a decent stat line, you've got an important trait, you've got a good on attack. And next we have Cinta Kaz, another heroic rebel. This one's a 3/5, and it says while this unit is upgraded, she gains Sentinel. So 3/5 vanilla at this point is not really good enough. The 3/5s we've seen got pushed so much that there are things like Obi that has like Sentinel when played. Like you have Cassian from the previous that had Smuggle. You might see some decks just need vanilla 3/5, especially like when the set comes out, we might not have enough otherwise, but this is a little better than that if you play upgrades. Now, what is the best way to actually give the Sentinel? In my mind, it's the Obi-Wan leader from Legends of the Force, because you're just going to want to give out experience tokens, especially if you're playing it in a Virgin's Temple build where you're not even that invested in the Force synergy. So you can just play this, give it an experience that turn, it becomes a 4/6 that has permanent Sentinel. That seems incredibly powerful to me. And that's like the first place I'd want to include Cinta, because I'm not trying to like use cards out of my hand to upgrade this. I mostly just want to use experience tokens. So another one that could do it would be the Leia leader from Secrets of Power. If you're going to be trying her out. I think Cinta could be great there. The floor here is still perfectly fine as just a 3/5 Rebel for 3, so the card is quite solid. We have Rogue One, and this is a new space unit. It's a 3/3 Rebel vehicle transport. It says when a friendly unit is defeated, look at the top 2 cards of your deck, put any number of them in the bottom of your deck and the rest on top in any order. So it does the Inferno 4 thing, except this is not just when it dies, it's when anything dies. The big problem here is that it's just a 3/3 for 3 in space, which is not a good enough stat line, in my opinion, to justify playing it for this ability. So I do not think Rogue One is a particularly good card. And then we have a new event. It's called The Tree Remembers. It's 4 cost. This is an enemy unit loses all abilities for this phase. If it costs 3 or less, defeat it. So let's start with like the basic version of this, which is it's a 4 cost to kill a 3 or less cost unit, which is a negative trade, right? That you're trading down, you're spending a 4 to kill a 3. There's a reason a card like Crushing Blow doesn't see play. That's the one that kills a 2, but you have to pay 3 for it. That is not a good enough trade in this game for the most part. But this does a little more, and there's some very important things about this card. So the fact that it removes all abilities first means that you can kill units that have Chewbacca Pilot on them. I think that's a pretty important one. So maybe this would be something to consider if Chewbacca is everywhere. The other thing is, because it doesn't say non-leader on it, it can kill pilot leaders that are in ships that cost 3 or less, which is going to be especially important for like leaders like Kazuda and Von Reg, who basically always jump into 3 or less ships, but even leaders like Han 4, who don't really even play 4-drop ships in their deck currently. Even Luke Pilot doesn't often jump into those kinds of ships, so it's going to create a lot of tension for these pilot leaders that jump into smaller ships, because all of a sudden they're going to get one shot by a 4-cost removal. So for both Chewbacca style effects and pilot leaders, this does some important stuff. Does that mean it can be a main deckable card? I think that's a stretch, just because it's like pretty bad in all other situations, right? You're not trying, like, this is even worse than Takedown, like at its default, because at least Takedown sometimes could kill larger than 3-cost units. This really won't. It can't target anything that costs 3 or... Well, it can target them just to remove their effect, but it can't defeat them. Overall, the card seems like an important piece to have access to. We'll see how it shapes up with like pilots and stuff like that. And now we're up to the green cards, and Syndicate Spice Runner is the first one. It's also villainous. It's a 2-drop, 2/2 Underworld. It says when played, search the top 3 cards of your deck for an Underworld unit, reveal it, and draw it. Solid, right? 2/2 that draws a card. Of course, you do have to be playing a full Underworld deck. This may be a decent card also to include in like a Jabba leader deck, just because self-bouncing this card can give you some value. You don't typically have the time to do it that much, but in certain matchups maybe. Just card advantage is going to matter a ton. It is understated for a turn 1 play. So in some ways, maybe you need ways to like finish off units that swallow this up. So pinging effects, things like that might be useful. How good is this just on turn 1? Like, it draws you a card, but then it gets eaten and you lose board. That's a little iffy, right? The card does look pretty solid to me overall, though. And, you know, this is the kind of thing that it's going to be like a support piece. I've used that word a few times for an Underworld traded deck. It's not going to be like the reason you're playing an Underworld traded deck, but it could be useful. We have Bib Fortuna. It's another Underworld unit. It's also villainous. It's a 3/2. It says when played, if you control another Underworld unit, create a credit token. That's a very powerful when played effect. Now, one maybe like issue here is that because this is a 2-drop, it's still not really a 2-drop, right? Like, yes, you can play this on turn 1, but 3/2s on turn 1 are often not very good in a lot of situations, especially in a world where there's a lot of 2/4s running around. So this is the kind of card you want to play when you have other units in play so that you can get that credit. But then you're losing a little bit of that equity from including it as a 2-drop, because usually you don't want tons of 2-drops in your deck because they are really, for most decks, only good on turn 1. Some aggressive decks like playing like double 2-drops on 4 resource, which may be the place where Bib shows up. Of course, with Jabba, maybe you play this on turn 2, and then you also have a resource to bounce it back to your hand if you'd like, and really go crazy with these credits. I will say this effect is quite strong. Like, if this is just the 3-2 that makes a credit reliably, that's pretty strong, as long as it fits into a curve where you're not losing the board too easily because you're playing low-costed units that aren't that good in combat. And Bib is not terrible in combat. It at least trades with the 3-3s, but it also gets eaten by the 2-4s, which means it's not always going to be a reliable turn 1 play. And when your 2-drop is not a reliable turn 1 play, then all of a sudden it doesn't count towards your turn 1 play equity. It becomes a little difficult sometimes to build around them and include them. Next, we have a new 1-drop. It's a Heroism 1. It's a Scarif Lieutenant. It's a 2-1 Rebel Trooper. When defeated, give an experience token to a friendly Rebel unit. That's a solid when defeated effect. 2-1 is fine for a 1-drop. What will make or break a card like this is having enough 1-drops that you can reliably go double 1-drop, because this is not a good turn 1 play if it's alone, right? First of all, its stats suck, and second of all, you wouldn't even have anything to give the experience token to. So, yes, this would be a really good one. Like, for instance, right now, imagine there was a Cad Bane Tarkintown Underworld unit version of this, where it was like, when defeated, give an Underworld unit an experience token. We would run 3 of that instantly, no questions asked ever, right? So this kind of card can be very good, but it entirely depends on the context of the format and how many other 1-drop rebels we have. I don't know if like you're including this as your only 1-drop in the deck with your purpose of going like 2-drop plus 1-drop on turn 2. That doesn't seem nearly as good to me as just being able to go double 1-drop. Next, we have a new rebel in Heroism. Also, it's the Masasi Group Marines. 4-4 Rebel Trooper, vanilla, right? So for a long time, villains were the only ones getting 4-4s for 3, while heroes were always getting the 3-5s for 3, and at least half of that has broken parity. I don't think we yet have seen a villainous 3-5 for 3 in this set, but we are seeing Heroism get that vanilla 4-4, and for aggressive decks, that's a pretty good stat line, right? They still just bounce into the 3-5s, so part of it doesn't matter that much, but they hit harder when they're going face. And a big issue for the 4-4s in Villainous has been that they just couldn't really support an aggro deck. There was General Grievous, Knight of Ren, right? But not really playing villain aggro with those cards. This card certainly could have been seeing play in the current world in a Sabine deck, for instance. And it looks solid, right? It's just we've seen these blank texted Heroism units, and here's another one, and solid card. We have Katana. It's a 3-cost 2-4. It's just command, right? It's Underworld Vehicle Speeder. It says when played and on attack, the next Underworld unit you play this phase costs 1 less. The when played part of it doesn't matter a ton, although if you are playing cheap Underworld units, for instance, the Bib Fortuna, you can play this on 4R and then immediately play that Bib Fortuna. You can play that Salacious Crumb unit for 0, right? So I won't say that when played is completely useless, but ideally you can play this on 3, next turn on your 4R, get an attack off, and then you're ramping into the 5 cost, which might be the bigger deal. The stats are abysmal for a 3-drop, though. It's a 2-4. I don't love that part of it. It is another Underworld synergy style piece, and it does look like there's a lot of cheap cards in Underworld. We see the Draw Underworld unit. We've seen the Bib Fortuna. We have Salacious Crumb. A lot of this stuff is in the precon for the Jabba deck. That's where a lot of these cards came from. So you kind of get the theme of what that Underworld tribe is trying to do in this set. Whether or not this card is good, and I think probably not, but I won't ever dismiss a resource cheating card automatically. All right, next is Common Cause. It's a 2-cost event. It says give a unit +1/+1 for this phase for each different aspect among units you control. This isn't very good. Yeah, like maybe you're giving +3/+3 for 2, which is like fine. It's very slow though. That would be like a very slow surprise strike in that sense. Yeah, like it's not great. Haymaker is a new removal. It's cost 4. It says give an experience token to a friendly unit. That unit deals damage equal to its power to an enemy unit in the same arena. So it's actually like very similar to Craving Power. Instead of giving +2/+2, it gives +1/+1, but it also costs 1 less. The one big hiccup on this is that it has to be same arena. So you can't use the effect to go into space if you're on the ground and vice versa, which is a big limitation for removal. When you're including removal in decks, you don't usually want them to be super situational. I do really like that the experience is permanent. Like, unlike the blue-green removal we saw earlier that gave +2/+2, this does permanently buff. So it is very similar to Craving Power for 1 less. But not being able to go across arena is a pretty big deal for removal. So I'm not entirely sure this is going to be good enough, although it has a lot of upside in that it permanently buffs and can be a pretty solid removal. Double Cross is a new rare event. It's a 6-cost event. It says choose a friendly non-leader unit and an enemy non-leader unit. You exchange control of those units. Then the player who takes control of the lower cost unit creates credit tokens equal to the difference. So this costs 1 less than Choose Sides, which was a fine card. For the cost of that 1 less, though, you're giving a bunch of credits away. Now, usually, right, I think usually when you play an effect like this, it's like I'm giving you a bad unit, I'm taking your best unit, and in that sense, you're going to be giving them a bunch of credits when you play this, which is not ideal. Now, if you do have like expensive units with really bad stats that have like some crazy when played effects or something, and then you can trade it for your opponent's lower cost units and then give yourself the credits, that would be a kind of interesting. I think the downside here overall is just too much for an effect like this to be good. And like Choose Sides was fine. It wasn't like a staple. It was seeing play a little bit. For an effect like that to be good, it's almost always give bad unit, take huge unit. And in that, yeah, like you're going to give your opponent like 5 credits. Is that like really a recipe for success? I don't think so. All right, so here's a big one. It's Expendable Mercenary. It's a 4-cost unit, 3/3 Underworld Bounty Hunter. It says when defeated, you may resource this unit from its owner's discard pile. So this is our replacement-ish for Super Laser Tech. Now, it's not a villainous only card, so anyone can use this. And it's ramp. It's permanent ramp. And we haven't seen a lot of permanent ramp yet, but we are getting some replacements for cards like Resupply and Super Laser Tech. And here's the first. And it's good, but it's not great. And I want to explain why this is actually 2 turns later than Resupply and Super Laser Tech, not 1 turn. Now, it costs 4, and both those cost 3, right? So you'd be like, well, no, that you play this a turn after. It's just, you're getting your ramp 1 turn later. Well, you're not really, because Resupply and Super Laser Tech both give you the ready resource for the next turn, right? So Resupply, of course, you don't get it immediately, but you play it on turn 2, and on turn 3, you have 5 resources ready. And Super Laser Tech, you don't get the resource on turn 2, but then when you attack into something and it dies on turn 3, you get that ready resource, and you have 5. So on turn 3, you have 5. So here, on turn 4, do you have 6? The answer is no, because Expendable Mercenary doesn't give you that ready resource. You play it on turn 3. On turn 4, which is your 5 resource turn, you can suicide this into something, but then it's an exhausted resource. You're still on 5 that turn. So you're not getting that to use this resource until 2 turns after what you would have been able to do with Resupply and Super Laser Tech. So it is a lot worse. Now, that resource can still be used to deploy your leader. So if you're ramping into a 6-cost leader, just because you only have 5 resources available doesn't mean you can't flip your leader. So in that way, it does still give you some benefit to that resource. The stats are still bad for a 4-cost, right? It's not going to do much in the world of trading. And in some ways, it's actually worse that this has 3 health, because if you don't have something to attack and suicide into with this Expendable Mercenary, then you can't even ramp that turn. So super laser tech having 1 health was often an upside, just so you can immediately kill it off. Having said all that, it's still solid ramp, and I still expect this card to see play. I think this card is absolutely amazing with the Krennic, the new Krennic, who you can now just play this, kill it for free, and get a credit. So you actually do get to use that resource the turn after, and not on top of that, you've double ramped yourself because you get a credit. So that is clearly very powerful synergy. So between this and like Legacy Run for Krennic, you do have some really good when defeated effects to run with his self-destruction ability. For other decks, I don't think this is going to be nearly the same kind of staple that a card like Resupply and Super Laser Tech were. And that's probably fine. Maybe those cards were like a little better than they needed to be. And maybe Ramp was a little too good early in the game. And now we have a slightly more toned down version of it. I'm happy that we still have Ramp as a potential, right? Don't forget Resupply Carrier is also a card that still exists. So there are some redundancies in Ramp. We're going to see one more in a moment. But yeah, like this card is solid. It also has that Underworld trait. So there are ways to like maybe get some benefit from that. Of course, the card that we saw, the Syndicate Carrier, can go find this. The Katana can make this cost 1 less on attack. Bib Fortuna can give you a credit. There's all kinds of like synergies that might matter with Underworld, that might matter with Bounty Hunter. Overall, it's a good thing this card exists, I think. I just want to like stress that this is not like a reprint of Super Laser Tech. It's not even close to as efficient. Next up, we have Admiral Mahdi. This is a 5-cost villainous unit. It's a 4/5 Imperial official. Says friendly leader units get +2/+2. If ever a card needed plot, it was this one. I do not think this card is very good as a standalone card. Yeah, like it's understated for 5. It does buff your leader. That's not terrible. Like the card is not bad. I can't imagine it's going to be good enough though to run. Mostly you're going to want it with 5-cost deploys also. And, you know, there's usually just something better to do. And here's that other ramp card I was talking about. This is Stockpile. It costs 6. It's an event. It says resource this event and the top card of your deck. So this is double ramp. This is just like resupply twice. It costs 6 though. Is that good? I mostly think I'd rather just play Resupply Carrier, where I get the resource, but I also get a unit. Now, if we're really in a world where, like, we're just trying to get to the largest thing possible ever as quickly as possible, then, of course, a double ramp card like this will be good. And maybe that's a particular matchup thing. Maybe that's a sideboard thing where we're playing, like, these big ramp-style decks, and in those matchups, what you do on turn 1 through 5 doesn't really matter. The idea is just to get to your 10 resource play as quickly as possible. And that does matter for this. Outside of that, it's incredibly slow. It does put you all the way up to 8, though. Although an 8 flip leader doesn't really... I don't think we're like... There is one. There's Avar Chris. Costs 9. But the idea there is obviously to make her cheaper. I don't know if there's going to be like an 8 flip leader that this matters with. Of course, like Emperor Palpatine from set 1 might have enjoyed a card like this where you can just surprise flip from 6 to 8 with one card. But yeah, like I don't know if we're going to be running this in addition to like the new Bounty Hunter ramp card, the Resupply Carrier. Like there's going to be credits around. Maybe you use credits to play this early and double ramp. Very interesting though. Like double ramp, that's a lot. It's just very expensive. And next up, we're on the aggression cards, and the first one is That's a Rock. It's a 1-cost event. It says deal 1 damage to a unit. So 1 cost, deal 1 damage to a unit. That's not good, but it has some cool text. It says when this event is discarded from your hand or deck, you may deal 1 damage to a unit. So then you're getting it for free. And this does look like a pretty direct support for the Vader leader, because now you get to discard this from your hand with his effect. You not only get the ping from his effect, but you also get the ping from this. So it's kind of a 0-cost daring raid in that sense, which is a pretty good card. It's actually a little better than that because you can split that damage as you'd like between 2 units or a unit and a base. What about other ways to like self-discard this from the top of your deck? There are ways sometimes to do that. I mean, that new base could do it, although we're not playing that new base, so we can free roll. That's a rock. So far, I think the main synergy here is for Vader, but it is very good with that leader. And we don't need too many cards that directly tie into that leader's ability to make it worth it. We just need maybe 2 or 3 cards. So that's a great start. It's a really cool effect. We'll keep tabs on other ways to maybe free roll this, and yeah, solid little role player. And next we have a really cool piece of art here on Fear and Dead Men. It's a 7-cost villainous event. It says this card costs 1 less to play for each card discarded from your hand this phase. It says deal 4 damage to each enemy ground unit. So again, Vader's on it. There is some synergy here. Of course, with just Vader's regular ability, you can then play this for 6 that turn and deal 4 damage to every enemy ground unit. And of course, you had gotten that extra ping effect from Vader, so maybe you could even kill like a 5 health unit. On his flip turn, if you discard a bunch of cards, you can then use this for way cheaper than 7. As a 7-cost event, this isn't great. As a 6-cost, it's still, I mean, there are issues here is that 4 is not always the greatest break point, especially late in the game. There's a lot of units that this just won't kill. It's going to be pretty situational into like what kind of sweeper this is and like how good it is. And the other issue is that it doesn't hit space units, so it's only 1 arena. I think it's okay. I think it's really cool. I think it's going to be very context dependent, very meta dependent, whether a card like this is going to be good enough. It's going to really target specific kind of go wide strategies that don't play big chunky units. And we'll have to see like how effective Vader is on actually pulling this off. If you're trying to do this for its cheap effect, there aren't a lot of other ways to like self discard from your hand outside of that leader right now. And not to do it reliably, right? And if you're spending resources to discard cards from your hand, then that reduction here is not going to be nearly as effective. So you want free ways to discard, which is really, again, just that Vader leader. All right, that was it for aggression, but we do have a bunch of cunning cards. It starts with Vermilion. It's a 6-cost space unit in Villainous. It's a 5/7 Underworld vehicle capital ship. Underworld is kind of relevant here because it, we've seen that, Katana to help this make cost 1 less and stuff like that. It says when the attack ends, if this unit survived, reveal the top card of a deck, so any deck, then choose a player. They may play the revealed card for free. If they do, a different player creates credit tokens equal to the card's cost. So you hit something, right? And then you reveal, top of yours. Let's say it's an 8-drop. You get to slam an 8-drop into play, but then your opponent gets 8 credits. Or vice versa, you can let them get the unit and you get the credits. This is a very like swingy, high rolly, like lottery style card. All in all, I don't think this is going to be a constructed staple because it's just a little too random. And also, even when it like hits, it could backfire depending on like if your opponent has good ways to utilize those credits immediately. The stats aren't like that impressive for a 6-cost. It's a 5/7. It is a capital ship though, so it's in yellow. Again, Piet could play this cheap and then try to like just cheat out its own capital ships and just try to overwhelm the opponent. It's not like terrible. I'm usually a little low on effects like these that like give your opponent a bunch of stuff also, like this dual-sided effect. But have to like try it out. All right, next is the Blade Wing. It's a 6-cost space unit. It's a 3/3 rebel vehicle fighter. It says when played, you may return a non-leader unit to its owner's hand. This is definitely better than it looks. I've seen discourse about this card being bad. This card is not bad. Cantina Bouncer, for instance, which was a double yellow 3/5. It did this effect for 5 costs. Now, yes, Cantina Bouncer is better than the Blade Wing. Cantina Bouncer was also in a double yellow trait. It barely saw play because of that. This could very well just see play, right? First of all, the format's going to look different, and it might be a little slower, which means being able to waylay an opponent's unit is going to be effective even at 6 cost. You are getting a unit spotted for your trouble, right? And if people are playing 6 cost, 7 cost units that don't have powerful when played effects, which right now does seem to be potentially where we're going, because it looks to me like a lot of the power units aren't all going to have powerful when played effects, then a card like Blade Wing can be incredibly powerful because it's a huge tempo swing. When this bounces a large unit, it's a massive tempo swing in your favor. You are adding to the board and removing from your opponents. The stats aren't like great, but neither were Cantina Bouncers. And yes, like again, this is not as good as Cantina Bouncer, but it's also just in one color. It has a relevant trait in Rebel. Actually has the fighter trait, which could matter for Luke. Yeah, I think this card is solid. I don't know if it'll be like a meta crusher, but I think this is a good card. Next, we have Backed by the Huts. It's a new event. It costs 3. It says create a credit token. You may deal damage to a unit equal to the number of friendly credit tokens. How much damage you want out of this before it's good? Probably 4, maybe 3. Now, it is spotting you a credit, so like, if this was 3 cost, deal 3, and it's making you a credit, would that be decent? It could be decent. We probably want a little more than that, which means we're now talking playing this with one of the credit generating leaders, which could be Krennic, it could be Lando, it could be Jabba. It might be good enough in those leaders. Krennic's interesting because I already mentioned Legacy Run as a yellow card, so yeah, like, it's going to be tough, though, I think, to get enough credits for this to be real removal. And then it becomes incredibly clunky when it's just sitting in your hand and it's only able to do like 2 damage or 3 damage. I think overall I'm not like super thrilled about this, but I'm not going to write it off completely. And next we have Rose Tico. This is a Heroism 5-drop. It's a 5/5 resistance unit. It says if you control a non-unique unit, this unit enters play ready. So if this was just a 5 cost 5/5 that entered ready, that would of course be quite solid. It's a little worse than that, of course, because you need a non-unique unit in play. Most units are unique in this game when they're getting played, but there are a decent amount of non-uniques, especially spy tokens, which could synergize quite well here. I think this card is solid. Like, this looks pretty good to me. I don't think this condition is going to be that hard to enable. And getting a readied 5/5 for 5 is a pretty big deal. It can go face for 5 immediately. That's massive damage. It can potentially get a value trade on your opponent. There's a lot of 5 health sentinels in the game right now that Rose can just chop right through, like Captain Typho, potentially Churret, stuff like that. Yeah, I think this card is solid. Next, we have Secret Battle of Pretend. It's a 2-cost heroism event. It says exhaust a friendly unit. If you do, for each different aspect, it has exhaust an enemy unit in the same arena. So if you use this on like one of those triple aspected cards, it's a 2-cost exhaust 3 units in the same arena. The problem is, of course, you have to exhaust your own unit, which I don't love. And then when it's not hitting 3, if you're only hitting like 2, I'm not super thrilled about this. So, like, yeah, and you also have to exhaust like a real unit if you're talking about a multicolor. Like, if this could be like exhaust a spy to exhaust 3 units, that'd be great. But a spy doesn't even have like, it's just, does that even have an aspect? I don't even think it has an aspect. So like, that wouldn't exhaust any, right? If you're only exhausting 1, of course, then this is not great. You're just exhausting 1 for 1. This will be very situational in my mind, and probably I think there's better exhaust effects available. And here's a big one. This is Bix Colleen, 4 cost, just cunning, no other aspects. It's a 4/5, so it's a 4 cost 4/5, which is like, you know, the stats are sufficient. It has a when played and on attack that you may discard a card from your hand if you do create a credit token. It's a very powerful when played and on attack effect to have. Of course, there are some discard synergies. We just saw, like, that's a rock. That could matter. You just get to free roll that and get a ping and make a credit. But just, like, making a credit is so huge. Like, you play this on 4, it means next turn you can play a 6-drop, maybe even a 7 if you get this on attack off. Of course, You can't use this ability like infinitely because your hand won't exist anymore, but I think once is probably going to be good enough to just make this valuable because you're already getting a pretty on-rate unit. Just that 4/5, you're getting that spotted. Um, Notably, this is a 4 cost that's cunning, which means that Lando leader with the idea of like skipping turn 1, you make a credit, you don't even play a card that turn, which means you're going to be up a card. Then turn 2, you use that credit to play your 4/5 and immediately get your credit back by discarding a card so that you can go all the way up to 5 resources the next turn, or have that credit available to you for your Lando flip turn. So I think that looks like a really solid synergy, but I could see this getting played in other decks as well. And of course, with anything that has discard synergy, you always want to talk about like the Anakin unit that lets you pitch heroic or villainous cards into your discard pile so that you can now trigger him. Bix can do that while also enabling him a turn earlier. So he costs 6, right? So you play her on 4. Next turn you will have 6. You can pitch that heroism card or villainous card and have that double triggered Anakin potentially. So I think this card is fantastic. Next up, we have the Black Sun Patroller. Never too late for this. It's a 2-cost villainous 2/2 Underworld vehicle fighter and has shielded. So it's Crafty Smuggler in space, has that Underworld trait. Cad Bane would have loved this card. Gar Saxon would have loved this card. And I mean, they can play this card in Eternal, but this card's just solid. Now, there may not be tons of synergy for it right now, like at least not the shielded synergy. There are some Underworld synergy stuff we talked about, like all those green cards we just previewed. And this is a pretty durable shielded unit. It's not that aggressive in space, right? 2/2 shielded is not going to be doing much trading in space, but it is going to stick around, which is nice. The card is just good. It may not be a staple. It may not see tons of play. That's going to be very context. It's like the kind of card that's very context dependent, but it's a very nice piece to be able to run if needed. And now we have the Weequay Pirate. It's a 2-cost cunning unit. It's a 2/3 Underworld, so more Underworld. It has Saboteur, and it says when played, if no resources were paid to play this unit, give an experience token to it. So let's start without the effect. 2-cost 2/3 Saboteur Underworld. Not good enough just on that rate, right? Because 2/3 for 2 is just understated at this point. It's going to get eaten by 3/3s. It's going to be worse than 2/4s. If you pay just credits to play this, though, that's the idea of paying no resources. So you're just using credits. So you spend 2 credits to play this. Then he's a 3/4 Saboteur. The problem here is, don't we have better things to do with our credits than try to like get a little extra value out of our 2 drops? I think we do. I don't think this card is very good overall. Probably is not where we want to be spending our hard-earned money. And a new event, the Axe Forgets. It's a 2-cost. It says return a non-leader unit that costs 3 or less to its owner's hand. So it's a smaller Waylay or a smaller Beguile. Costs 2, but it bounces 3 or less. I don't think this is great. Like, if we absolutely always need to be able to like bounce units that get upgraded on turn 2, then like maybe we would include this. But the real benefit of those cards like Waylay and Beguile are usually because they get you a bunch of resource tempo. Not being able to bounce larger units could be a pretty big downside. And here's Jyn Erso, and I mentioned this card earlier with that red-yellow card that you can give your opponent a unit you control. So this is what Jyn does. He's a 3-cost cunning unit. He's a 0/5. He says, when played, you may have an opponent take control of this unit. And it says enemy units gain Raid 1 and Saboteur. So it buffs your board once you give it to your opponent. Now, your opponent can still suicide this into your board. So I think mostly you're going to want to be playing this in a space deck if you're running this. Maybe even like a Vader yellow deck. Then your opponent has nothing to attack this into. So it just sits there and it buffs your whole board, your whole space board with Raid Run and Saboteur. Kind of like in that sense, it's like more copies of Victor Leader. A little worse than Victor Leader, but it's also like more difficult to remove because your opponent is going to have a hard time getting rid of it. Now, you legitimately cannot play this card against Krennic. So Krennic is like a hard counter to this. You give him Galen, and then Krennic goes and kills Galen, which is kind of thematic, I guess, and gets a credit out of it. So no go there. And like I mentioned, there's that event where you would give your opponent a unit and then deal 4 to something. That would be an absolute blowout if they were running that card and you gave them Galen. They give it back to you and also kill one of your units. Overall, though, I think maybe this would be like a utility card that you would include in a space aggro deck. I think mostly if the Saboteur matters a lot. Raid is great, but like we said, Victor Leader already can buff your board. If you want extra, that's fine. But remember, these decks usually need to add to the board. They can't just be taking turns off to like buff their board. And Galen is taking a turn off. But if both of these effects, both the Raid and the Saboteur, combine into something very effective, like your opponent, like play this once your opponent taps out for a big Space Sentinel, and then your whole board can get through it, plus get 1 damage each extra from all of them. That can be pretty powerful. So Galen looks like a pretty interesting utility piece. It's a very interesting effect. We haven't seen something like this before. And yeah, I like it. All right, just a couple cards left. This is just a villainous card. It's Black Sun Kabbalist. It's a 1/3 that costs 2. It's Underworld. It says give an experience token to another friendly Underworld unit when played. Not good enough, right? Because even if it hits, it's still just like 2/4 worth of stats for 2. But this isn't a turn 1 play because you can't have another turn 1. You won't have another turn 1 unit in play when you play this. In which case, it's a later turn play, but then it's just a bad unit, right? It's a 1/3. This is not good. And last, from a certain point of view, it's a 1-cost neutral card. It says play a card from your hand, ignoring its aspect penalties. This card is not good at all, but I want to explain why this isn't good, because when you read it, you might think it's good and be like, well, no, I get to cheat resources. That's very powerful. You're not cheating resources. You're paying rate for a card that's out of aspect, and that's a very important difference. It's why a lot of these aspect cheating leaders that we've seen so far, like Hera and Mon Mothma, etc., aren't very good. It's because they're not cheating resources. They're just letting you play cards that other decks get to play at rate, right? You get to play some card that you wouldn't be able to play in your deck, but you get to play cost for it. But you're getting to play cost for it, right? That's very important. You're not cheating costs. You're just playing cost for cards. And in this case, you're not even paying cost. You're paying 1 extra. So instead of paying the normal aspect penalty, which is 2, or maybe even more because you do ignore all aspect penalties here, you're paying 1 extra. And you're spending a card. So you're 2-for-1ing yourself and paying an extra resource, all for the pleasure of playing a card that other decks get to play at rate. That's not good. It just isn't. There's a huge opportunity cost for including cards like this. There's huge opportunity costs for including this and having to hold onto it in your hand. And then all of a sudden you're also playing cards that you can't otherwise play in your deck. And you have to like hold on to that card. And then what if you don't draw this event? Then those cards all cost 2 to 4 to 6 extra, whatever amount of aspect you're splashing there. I don't even think this is good in limited, honestly. I'd rather just use the epic base action for the event and not have instead of this event, instead of having to run this. Like ignoring aspect penalties is not a huge buff, right? I want to stress that because it's very important for other leaders as well. Like there's new ones in this set, Agent Callus and Hera. And Agent Callus, you're paying 1 extra for all the out of aspect cards you're playing. Cards are costed so that they're good at the cost you pay for them. They're not really costed to be good at extra costs. And to date, we've seen very few cards that are worth that. The primary one has been Vigilance, and a lot of that had to do with like the utility it provided control decks. Even Vigilance wasn't like fantastic at 6. It just filled a very important role in these decks. The mass healing specifically, and then the win condition of milling. Very few other cards have ever been worth out of aspect cost. There's been a few others that sometimes got splashed. But yeah, like mostly you're not trying to pay out of aspect, even if you can play them at rate. And this is not at rate. This is way below rate. It's +1 cost and an extra card out of your hand. So this isn't really how you want to build. The one exception I can think of is if there happens to be like a combo that simply cannot be enabled without this, right? It's a combo that works in a green red hero deck, but it's a blue like green yellow hero deck, but this is a blue red villain card that like just combos in that green yellow hero deck or something, right? And you can't play that card, right? It would cost 6 extra. It's gonna be impossible to do it. And then all of a sudden maybe you can think about running this if it's like the kind of combo that would like win you the game when you do it. Then yeah, like maybe there's a world where you can squeeze a card like this into a deck just for that. Otherwise, no, you are not just like gonna splash good cards in our decks just because we want, like just because we can. There's gonna be enough good cards to play that you won't need to splash out of aspect, plus include this to 2-for-1 yourself, plus pay an extra resource. It's just really not going to be realistic. And I know I've spent a lot of time on this card, but it's because I've read a lot of comments in various places about how this could actually be an important card. And I really want to stress that I do not think this card is going to be particularly good. And if I whiff on that, so be it. I've whiffed on other cards before. I try to give my most honest take on all of them as possible. And that's it. That's all I got for you. It's a very long review. We had a lot of cards today, but let me know what you think of them. There's a lot of really cool stuff. The leaders are really interesting. The cards, I think, are great. It's going to be a really fun set and a really fun rotation when it hits. And that's all I got. Until next time, take care.